Rick and I went on a journey of our own. Okay, yeah, I'll tell you when. And let go of the shore and did this thing for me especially, which was about returning home. It was about returning to my roots. And it started with an invitation a year ago to perform a wedding for a dear friend in my college town. And then I followed that up with an inquiry at the Unitarian Universalist church I grew up in, asking if they would welcome me to speak. And as it happened, the current minister who had been there for 12 years was retiring, and her last Sunday was the week before the one that I was supposed to speak. It all just came together. There was obviously something bigger going on. So, in going back to explore my own roots and discover or rediscover the wings that I had found, I had a feeling for quite a long time that it was going to be a special trip. So it was this original saying yes to the wedding invitation, and then yes to this very powerful urge to email this church and ask them if I could come speak, that turned into this really meaningful journey. And then it was all about just showing up, getting ready, let it go, and allowing it to become whatever it became. So I wanted to move forward with this concept that we're looking at roots and wings today, and that if we revisit our roots and find our wings, we can come home to who we truly are. So a lot of people are traveling right now and having family members visit as well. And every time we get together, we have these opportunities to revisit our roots and find our wings. And with a smile, with a little bit of necessary sugar humor, so to speak, we may discover that when we're in the presence of family members who haven't been with us every step of our growing way, that somebody's required to revert back to who we used to be. Or you might have a sibling who doesn't see you as, I was the youngest in my family, the baby. So you may have a sibling, for example, who doesn't really see you as the adult that you are today. You may have taken on a viewpoint about yourself that mysteriously shows up again whenever you get with your family. So you can imagine, you know how these things can go. Goethe wrote, "There are only two lasting bequests we can hope to give our children. One of these is roots, the other is wings." Actually, I was looking further into gardening metaphors for raising children, and there's somebody in Australia who wrote sort of a scathing paper about this tendency in the mid to late 1800s to compare children to plants, as if, if you like plants, then you'll know how to raise your children. I think she must have had a bad time of it, because it was a very well-written paper. In any case, I still like these metaphors. I love anything. The thing about metaphors is that they relate to a universal truth, one of which, and there are many, will empower us. Empower us in some way by understanding how that principle is represented in the metaphor. So roots are defined as the part of the plant that grows downward into the soil, anchoring that plant and absorbing nutriment, I didn't know that was a word, and moisture. Wings are defined as the two forelimbs for most birds and bats, and corresponding to the human arms, which are specialized for flight. I love that. Specialized for flight. So Goethe did indeed choose wonderful metaphors when he talked about this idea of if there were only two things that we could give our children that would be lasting, that would carry them throughout their lifetimes, they would be roots and wings. If we're not sure that we have yet done that for our children, if we are parents, grandparents, there's still an opportunity, as long as you're both on the planet. And indeed, you can even do work with those who have passed on indirectly through all kinds of ceremony. If you have a feeling that you didn't really get the best roots or wings, well, there's still an opportunity to get them. Remember that trend that was really big back in what we refer to now as the me generation, the 80s, called reparenting? Big thing. To go back and reparent yourself. Some of these things still hold value. The other possibility is that we can offer roots and wings to one another in our relationships with our partners, our spouses, our siblings, our parents, grandparents, our children, our friends. We can offer those to one another. So, if we want to understand something, because to understand it is to attain the power that it offers, Ernest Holmes says that to the degree we understand something, it becomes law in our lives. So, right now, this morning, we're setting out to understand roots and wings better. Why? Because roots offer us something and wings offer us something, and we'd like to make sure that we're getting those parts of life that each has to offer. So this is what we just look for when we're looking for what roots are. We're looking for those parts of ourselves that reach into the soil of life and anchor us on solid ground. They seek and they find and they open to the nourishment and vitality that life has to offer. And they do this all the time. Roots don't have like a mood. They are an instinctive part of us that is forever seeking and finding what is required for fulfillment and vitality. Wings are the part of us which we say are specialized for flight. They transport us from places, and they transport us to places. They might take us away from harm. They might take us towards sources of shelter and food and companionship. And another really neat thing happens in flight as well. I know that there are many traditions where, and in the Native American tradition especially, where the objectivity of the hawk is described as so vital. When we metaphorically take flight, and so perhaps we mean in this case lightening up our viewpoint about something, allowing our imagination to take us to another possibility or several, is that we get objectivity. When we somehow allow ourselves to take flight, we get to see things in a new way and maybe solve a problem. Maybe resolve something that we've been unclear about. Free ourselves up. Get off the ground, so to speak. So we're looking for those parts of ourselves that represent our roots, that anchor us, seek and find and take in all the nourishment we need. And our wings, which help us to take flight and move from one place to another, as well as to get that point of view that frees us up from where we have been maybe stuck on the ground. So when we revisit these areas in our lives, we may ask ourselves, how did I do? How, and what is the kind of soil that I grew up in? Can you imagine if you look back and you say, well, okay, I think the soil that I grew up in was excellent. I really got a good experience of anchoring. And so that's not an issue for me. Nourishment, however, and finding and taking in what I needed, maybe that was a little weak. Maybe I held back. Maybe I was just a little too polite. Maybe there were 8 or 9 of us kids, and so I thought, I'm just going to try to hold back on what I need and sort of help out by needing less. There may be some really subtle perception of less than enough that cause you to pull back a little bit. There's a beautiful line from a song that David Wilcox wrote. It says, all of the roots grow deeper. All the roots go deeper when it's dry. And it's actually this beautiful song about the human experience. So if you had dry periods in your life, your roots may have gone deeper, and that served to anchor you. But it may have also created, a pattern of not being out in the world as much, right? Of being isolated more. Again, if you adapted because the soil in your early life seemed to include some lack or limitation, perhaps it's time to open up again. We were just doing this wonderful class, The Art and Practice of Living with Nothing and No One Against You. And we finished up over the past 2 weeks looking at this concept of taking an old historic scenario from our lives and putting it back into the wave state of undecided, undifferentiated, infinite possibility. And imagining that we might collapse the wave into a new particular reality other than the one that we experienced. Pretty fascinating. Very science fiction-y. But it was more than fun. It was very meaningful to realize that we could actually go back and shift something that had set up a pattern of limitation in some way with regard to possibility. Similarly, revisiting our wings, we may have realized either that we learned how to fly very well. And when we think about flight in terms of our youth, you might imagine that it has something to do with getting out of the nest, right? It's everything from getting on that school bus for the first time as a really little person to going away to school and actually being away from home for more than one sleepover. Oh my goodness. That experience of going away to school and you get all packed up and you got your matching, twin bed sheets and your toaster oven and your teapot and whatever, all those things that we typically are sent off to college with. Whatever the case may be, there's that first experience of going away from home. But what we carry with us throughout life is actually a constant reference back to whether we've differentiated well or not. We bring our parents with us. We bring our family of origin with us. And we either do it in great grace and wisdom, or we're still getting that along the way. We may have people riding along with us who haven't been on this planet for years. And we might still be playing out that same pattern of relating that we had back then. If that's the case, we may realize that our wings are clipped. You know how when you have a domestic bird, you keep it in a cage and you get it checked up, however birds are checked up, and you usually have their wings clipped so that they can't fly. What we consider to be clipped wings in this teaching would be limited beliefs that we accidentally took on and thought were true about ourselves and life that are keeping us from flight today. So there are all kinds of ways to go back again, whether it's these worksheets that we did or so many others, books, processes, ceremonies. You can make it up on a walk, a trip to the beach, a jaunt in the woods. You can do it with a notebook and a burning coal or a little campfire. There are so many ways that we can do this piece. What we want to know is if we have learned to fly well, or if there's something about our capacity to spread our wings, to find our way, to take that leap, to leave something in our life when it is complete, which is perfect and good, and move on to, and seek and find and recognize and arrive at the next thing gracefully. So that's what wings mean to us. It's interesting that I I'm very careful about getting on Facebook because I have this belief that once I go, it's like down the rabbit hole, Time is lost. And I went in to check in because I have family members that I was connecting with over everything from congratulations on the wedding to medical diagnosis and this and that. And I went in, and one of the people who has come here and continues to stay in touch over the internet, he was saying something beautiful about his two sons and how he wishes for them so much more than he ever experienced himself. And it is his dedicated goal to make sure that that happens. And so I told him about roots and wings, and then I thought I need to give him the whole quote because he's living this right now. And he loved it. This idea that he could give his 14-year-old twin sons, give them more than he got, or just do his very best to make sure that they have a really good start. Every time we celebrate Mother's Day and Father's Day, and every time we look back on in some way at where we came from, it can be bittersweet. We're all, of course, doing the best that we can with what we know. Everyone has been and always will be doing that. I was looking with my stepsister at some of this ancestry stuff that's available online. And looking at these amazing journeys of these people who came from Scotland and Ireland and England and Sweden and on boats and they had 9 children, but you look at the census later and a bunch of them aren't there anymore. It was just amazing. Shipbuilders and merchants and carpenters, every one of them questing and doing the best they could and taking extraordinary risks. And that's really what it's about. If that's the case, then, isn't it wonderful to consider this concept of being anchored in life? What does that mean to us now? To be anchored? Well, let's see. I could be anchored in a belief system that I resonate with, that works for me, that feels true, that's there when I need it. I could be anchored with a group of people that I identify as my true family. I could be anchored in a set of things that I do each day that help me be centered. Because what does an anchor do? In terms of the nautical metaphor, it's something that you put down into the solid ground, which is beneath the water that's constantly moving, and the elements of the wind, which are contributing to that movement. And it allows you to know you could actually drop anchor, and if that anchor is secure, you could sleep through the night knowing that when you wake up, you'll still be in the same spot. So something like that, whatever it is for you, is one of the things that your roots can do for you. The other thing is the nourishment. The nourishment. If perhaps you adapted to the environment that you were born into, and in any way it was less than what it could be. And by the way, the only reason that is because we're evolving. As a species, we're evolving. As spiritual beings having a human experience, we're evolving from what we have known to what we're constantly discovering. So of course more is possible than what we have yet experienced. Are your roots open? Do you seek and know that you will find and recognize and open to and take in all that you require to be truly fulfilled, to do everything that you've dreamed of? Or have you learned to minimize those dreams? Have you forgotten what it's like to be open? Have you gotten into a safe pattern or just a habit of daily living that's got nothing new going on? Those roots are still there in you. They still have the natural capacity to work as they ever did. And they can open and grow and take in and find and conduct more life energy and vitality for you today. Just know that they're there. And those wings. You know, one of my nephews posted a really great picture on Facebook. He celebrated a birthday on July 3rd, and he got I don't know how, somebody with a helmet cam taking a picture of him jumping out of a plane with a parachute. And his face is just, mashed with these goggles and these big buggy eyes. And so I'm guessing if I look closer, I'd find that it was one of those very significant birthdays. But he decided to open up. And I know, because I've watched him since he was a child, he grew up in an environment where there was a strong belief that there isn't enough and we aren't enough. And he has lived every moment of his life defying that, proving otherwise to himself, showing his siblings and his parents and anyone else with any belief and limitation that more is possible. He's extremely fulfilled in his career. He is traveling. He has an amazing job in the sports world. He's prospering. He's doing all kinds of things, like one of those commitments to do a good deed, to pay it forward for 100 days in a row, and sharing all of that. So I thought about that flight and this concept of this parachute jump as a wonderful example of flying. I want to share two pictures with you that sort of are my way of closing, because I told you that for me this trip was about roots, and for the person whose wedding I did, it was about wings. So let's just look at these two together. Anybody see this on Facebook?
Yes.
Yes? Okay. That's me. I'm 10. Okay. And this is Dr. Benjamin Spock. He 1972. In June of 72, he was on a campaign. As it turns out, I read the research. He was on a campaign on a People's Party ticket to become the President of the United States in 1972 because he felt like things needed to change. He started out over here, went over there, and then went over there, and no, he didn't become president. This is the famous baby doctor, and it was all about how to raise kids with good roots and wings, right? Okay. So I was talking with him very seriously, and that environment was where I gave the talk. It's the same room that I gave the talk in last Sunday. So that was really neat. They have this baptismal font that they've changed into a podium. They've eliminated the bowl and put a piece of plywood in there, and now they put a candle on it. But it was the original one from gosh knows what. It was dedicated in 1901. I was baptized there in 1962. So that was a really neat trip for roots. Wings. This is a very poorly taken photo by me I was a photography student for one semester. Overexposed. But this is Shannon. She's 10 in this picture. I was 10 in the last one. So that makes me about 20. Well, no, actually, she was probably about 9 years old because I was 19, or she was 8 because I was 18. Taking this picture at college in Burlington. Now, this is the little girl who jumped on my shoulders and asked me, "Will you be my big sister?" And I said yes. So she's 42 now, and I just performed her wedding in that town in Burlington, and we walked through that park. But there she is with wings, right? Interesting thing. I'm done with those, thank you. Interesting thing is that even if you think that you don't have much to offer another person, of course you know you're mistaken, right? I taught Shannon things that I was beginning to learn were other ways of seeing and being. She was the first person I shared a section of a self-help book with and said, "I just learned that the world is your mirror." She got that book and lived by it, and for ages. It just It was just such a treasure. I taught her about things that she's gone on and done amazingly well with, and I still don't get. This is really funny. She's doing very, very well, and she's living a life that is based on what matters most to her. And she says, I learned it from you. I remember my sister, Betty Ann, taught me through many different machinations how to clean my room, because we shared a room together. I may talk about this in about a month. But we shared a room, and she tricked me into this method for cleaning it, because I was like just a cyclone everywhere I went. But my sister is not a neat person. She taught me to be tremendously organized and neat, and she's still a mess. So, see? Even if you think you don't have it to give, if you share that ideal, if you share that root, if you point out those wings, along the way, you will influence somebody's life. So what I'd like you to consider today, as we bring this to a close, is that yes, there's a possibility that the roots and wings you remember aren't that perfect. You may have even devised some convenient way to either avoid or knuckle through those times when you get together with family and friends over the holidays. And possibly, just possibly, there's an opportunity to go back and see that place and those people in a new way. And possibly, just possibly, learning to see yourself in a new way will change how they see you. You get to go first in the center of your universe. We all do. That's how it works. So I'd like to just invite you to close with me by doing a prayer. If you close your eyes, and we'll just wrap this up together. I know that spirit has deep roots because it is the source of all roots. I know that spirit is anchoring because it is the very idea of anchoring. I know that spirit is nourishing because it is the very creator of nourishment. And I know that spirit has wings and flies because it is the creator of each of these. I know that we are one with spirit, and therefore I know that we are anchored and nourished, that we have wings and that we fly, and that everything that we require for the fulfillment of every dream and desire, the answer to every question and prayer, every need, that all of it is already right here. And so I give thanks for this fact, knowing that the gift has already been given. And because this is so, I recognize that there's one thing left to do, and that is to celebrate. In gratitude for this, I simply release my word. I know it is already done. And together, as we open our eyes, we say, and so it is.